Okay, hello everyone. Today is August 6th, 2020. This is the every 2 week product updates on the Moovweb XDN. Normally these are on Wednesday. We're a little 1 day off due to scheduling issues. Off by one error, classic. But with that said, let's have Yvonne take it away and walk us through this week's updates.
Yes, hello everybody. Thank you, Sean. All right, let's start as, so regarding the XDN version, we call XDN packages. 2 weeks ago, we were at version 1.43.0. And in the past 2 weeks, we have issued a number of improvements and fixes, and we are now at the version 1.45.5. Regarding the improvements and fixes, first and foremost improvement is the support for next 9.45. And then we have improved the TTL on the caching page. There is a demo upcoming for that, TTL projections. And then there is we had 2 improvements on the local caching emulation that we now take into account the custom cache keys, as well as we emulate the prefetching behavior of XDN, of the XDN platform in the cloud. Regarding fixes, well, you can see them on the screen, but I want to call out 2 things. There were switches on the user experience during split testing. In some cases, when the customers were, or users of your site were hitting third-party site that would redirect them, that could lead to switching of the experience during the split testing, during the A/B testing. And then there was cases where we detected that in the global edge that we distribute, on which your site is distributed, there could be, under some circumstances, leftovers, so-called cache poisoning, which is what we call a stale responses being cached as if they were not stale. So those were also fixed. Other than that, surrogate cache clear issues on some backends, cross-origin essence were not handled by service worker, sort of just reading through these. But those are the improvements and fixes that I want to call out. Regarding the XDN Developer Console, we have an upcoming demo of the 2 of these things. There's a copying of environments now. So if you have a complex environment that you want to, for example, you have a complex set of rules in your production environment, you want to replicate them on your pre-production. The easy way to do that now is to simply clone the copied environment from production to pre-production. And then there is the regarding the access logs on the XDN. As you may know, the XDN XDN Enterprise includes access logs and your access to them. So the way to be able to read them is through the access logs tab on the site. I'll show that off in a little. Ishan, do you want me to go into cache optimization? I guess this is your moment. Let me, and then I'll demo the rest.
Okay, yeah, I'll talk about cache optimization. We'll wrap up the slides, and then you can demo the stuff that was just on the previous slide. So just wanted to give a brief tutorial on cache optimization. Now is a good time because of the new features that we just rolled out to help you diagnose and optimize your cache even further. But I felt like it was useful to give you guys a little more context overall. So let's go to the next slide. So first off, why is this important? Well, a high cache hit rate is really important for performance in multiple ways. For example, if you're on a framework like Next or Nuxt or React Storefront that uses server-side rendering, you want that server-side rendered page to be served from the cache, so your users don't have to wait for React to run server-side and stream out all that HTML. It's also especially important because the XDN includes prefetching that streams data just a few seconds ahead of the shopper, and that delivers really instant speeds. But for that prefetching to work properly across all of our points of presence, it again needs to be cached across all of those points of presence. So caching is really especially critical on the XDN, and it's really especially critical for delivering instant performance. So what we've added, if you go to the next screen, is the tools to help you deliver the best possible cache hit rate. So the problem you now may face is, hey, my cache hit rate is low. How do I improve it? And the solution, next slide, please, is two tools that we give you, Cache Metrics tab and CDN-as-JavaScript. In a previous talk, Mark has demonstrated CDN-as-JavaScript. I'll talk a little bit about that, but most of this will be talking about the Cache Metrics tab, which has some new features that we've just rolled out. So let's move to the next slide. And let's just take a step back and consider what are the factors that affect the cache hit rate of a website. The first is what you're using as the cache key. Is the full entire URL part of the cache key, or do you only need part of it? A classic example is UTM variables that are used by, say, analytics and tracking will by default by most CDNs be considered part of the cache key. And that'll really bust your cache. We'll talk about that in a little bit. The other key element is how long you're setting the expiration time. How long do we let items stay in that cache? Sometimes called the TTL, or time to live. And then the third and less appreciated factor that affects your cache hit rate is the actual distribution of the traffic to your site. So if all the traffic, is going to a single URL, it's a lot easier to cache than if your traffic is spread across multiple SKUs and multiple URLs. Next slide. Now, when you look at these three factors, they kind of break out in two dimensions. The stuff at the top is stuff you can control. And you can control it on the XDN very easily through CDN-as-JavaScript. So I like to think of these as the knobs you can control and levers you can move. The part at the bottom, the distribution of traffic, which is less well appreciated, is not something you can control. Instead, what you need is the data to drive your decision making, and the tool there is to diagnose via the cache metrics. So for example, when you're going there and you're trying to figure out what is the right TTL to set, you're kind of in the dark. People often make it up. But what we're giving you with cache metrics is the ability to actually really make precise judgments. So for the first part of this, solving the cache key issues, you can diagnose cache fragmentation due to those query parameters that we talked about earlier through this query parameter misses section of the cache metrics tab. And here it simply ranks out the different query parameters in terms of their contribution to cache misses. And then once you know those query parameters that are actually affecting your cache key, you can remove them or customize your cache key with CDN-as-JavaScript. And I'll walk you through a conceptual example on the next slide. Next slide. There we go. So here's an example for a retailer. This comes from looking at an actual retailer on Instagram. And if you look at the actual URL that you get sent to, it's this massively long URL. You can see all these query parameters at the very end of this. And it turns out only one of these query parameters actually is going to affect the content of this page. It's the SKU ID. It's the very first query parameter. And all the rest won't. And even worse, the query parameter highlighted in red, that _I, is actually unique per user. So you're actually sending a bunch of social media traffic all to a single page, which is very much the same for every one of those users, but you're actually busting the cache for every single request. So this unique per user is going to cause a cache miss, which will cause a slow page, which will cause, as we like to joke around with puns, a CASH cache miss as well. So you get worse performance, which means lower conversion rate. So the way to solve this is really just 3 lines of CDN-as-JavaScript. In your routes.js file, you'd basically just set your expiration time, or TTL. In the API for CDN-as-JavaScript, it's called max age seconds. And you just set a number there in number of seconds. You can see that in the second line there at the part at the bottom. And then you set the key parameter with the new custom cache key, And in this case, we use the exclude all query parameters except command to say these are the query parameters that really matter for this content, and you basically just solve this problem for this page. So that's cache normalization, or cache key normalization, I should say. Let's move on to the next slide. So then the second knob that I mentioned was changing your TTL, or your expiration time. And we've encountered this on a couple sites. You can run into a situation where you may normalize as much as you think you can, and it turns out there's no way to really improve your cache hit rate other than to extend your TTL. And so we now have this projected cache hit rate screen. The common objection to extending your TTL is very often, the longer I extend my TTL, the longer it takes for, say, changes to propagate through the system. If, say, somebody makes a change to a banner or some CMS content. Now, you can sometimes fix those through micro-targeted clearing of the cache with surrogate keys, and we'll talk about that probably in another session. But very often you're kind of left in the dark in terms of what your projected cache hit rate would be for a given TTL. Next slide. So to solve your cache expiration issues and to look at your optimal TTL from the cache metrics, what you need to do is go to this section of the cache metrics tab, where at the very bottom it'll show your projected cache hit rate across a series of different time frames. We fix it at 1 minute, 5 minutes, 15 minutes, 1 hour, 6 hours, 1 day, and 1 week. And that'll give you a ballpark sense of what your cache hit rate would be as estimated by the system at given values of your TTL, or max age in seconds. And then you can use that to guide how you're going to set your cache expiration in CDN-as-JavaScript. Next slide. Sorry, next slide. No, go back. I think you're gonna have to restart the deck. It's missing. Yeah.
All right, give me a second.
Yep, there we go.
Which one is?
It's the very last slide before Q&A.
All right.
Okay, so your overall cache optimization strategy is really to go look at the cache rate and TTL section and compare your actual cache hit rate against what the projected cache hit rate for your given TTL is. And you can see an example of this here to the right. And if your TTL, sorry, if your cache hit rate for your given TTL is close, then it means that normalization of your cache keys are unlikely to improve your cache hit rate, and you probably need to increase your TTL to improve the cache hit rate. There's no way normalizing that cache key is going to improve things if you're already close to your projected cache hit rate. If they are not close, then it means that you probably are going to improve your cache hit rate simply by normalizing your cache keys. And again, increasing your TTL may still also help, but you can use this to guide you. So here in the example to the right, you can see that there's a cache hit rate of roughly 88%, 89%, which is, if you look at the projections, the TTL for this site is 86,400 seconds, which is 1 day. And we'll probably have an enhancement to make the units the same so you can compare these easier. But if you then look at the projection for 1 day, you see that it's 98.9 is the projected cache hit rate. So what this seems to indicate is there's still a little bit of room to improve the cache hit rate by reducing fragmentation with the cache keys. But other than that, if you want to improve it, you probably need to increase the TTL beyond that. Okay, so with that, Yvonne, why don't you do your demo and then we'll jump to Q&A.
All right, sounds good. So I will demo here one by auth errors, right? I have this demo for yesterday. This is a demo of the environment and the coupling of the environment, as I mentioned before, and then of the access logs. As I mentioned before, the you can now, the easiest way, for example, is to, if you need to move, you know, if you have a very complex configuration, like here, I just use this as an example. Some API keys, you may have a, you know, multiple of these, many split testing rules. And the easiest way now to go and copy this rather than, you know, copying manually is to simply go to environments and say test. You say, I want a new environment. That new environment is number 4. And then once it's created, you can see that it's already populated by the environment variables that the same one had, the original one had. And then again, in this case, it's a you know, you can imagine easily this having many different environment variables, especially in your production. And so this is the easiest way to sort of clone the environments between production and pre-production, or vice versa if it's the first time you're launching. It depends on the sort of flow. The second thing I wanted to show.
Ivan, could we actually go back to the slide just so we
Sure.
can tell people
Yes.
what we're actually demoing?
Oh, yes, of course. Sorry about that. Give me a second. So we are demoing now copying of environments and access logs and networking tab, and then XDN versions as well. So this is copying of the environments. If I go here to this demo, let me mention this briefly as well. We added now this the XDN column so that you can easily tell what version of the XDN was, or what stack of the XDN, if you will, was your project deployed at what time. And then furthermore, the final thing that I want to show you is this, which is that we added these networking and access logs. Networking now has the DNS configuration and IP whitelist, and access log has everything that you need to get access to the logs for your site. I won't show here obviously the secret access key, but you can see that the access log is always an S3 bucket, and then there is a certain access key and secret access key that allow you to read those. And I'll demo this now. So for example, I have everything already set up here, that you can see the logs here. So in this case, all we have right now is this. So if I curl this, so this is demo, you know, 2020-08-06, I will get a 302. I will get a 302 response. And while we wait for that to propagate from, you know, from the edge to here to the access logs, I'll just show you how you can read these. So let me copy this one. So this is S3 copy. So I'll copy this log that we had here. I'll copy it locally, and then I'll just unzip it and show the. All right, I already had it. So here, this is, let me show that in a better way. So these are all the information that we collect and then give access to you. So you can see that this was not the same one. I'm waiting for that one to. I'll grab that one in a moment. But you can see here the IP. You can see here the XDN version, the timestamp in Unix epoch, the unique request ID, you know, user agents, and so on and so forth. So let me just revisit one more time here to see it. Well, I guess I'll have to wait more. But in the meantime, while I'm waiting for this to propagate, maybe we can go to Q&A Nation, or if you had any questions around this or anybody else.
Yeah, thank you, Ivan. So as a reminder, you can ask questions in the chat. The first one coming in is, how is the projection calculated? So I assume that's for the Cache Metrics tab. So the way the Cache metric hit rate is determined is by looking again at your actual traffic. So, you know, as I mentioned earlier, your cache hit rate is really determined by partially the actual traffic and its pattern coming to the site. What we do is we define a window from when you're currently looking at the Cache Metrics tab. So we go back, I believe, about a week, and then we look at the rate of requests for essentially each URL that comes into the site. And we get essentially an average rate of requests over that time period. And we use that to mathematically extrapolate how many cache hits and misses would have happened during that time period. So you can think about this conceptually as, if a URL was only hit once during a certain window, then it's always going to be a cache miss. If it was hit, say, 3 times during the window, we can say that first time will be a cache miss, but the second and third time will be a hit. So that'll give you roughly a 66% cache hit rate. You can then repeat that calculation over all the distinct URLs, and you basically end up with a projected cache hit rate. We essentially do that estimate, add some efficiency to the calculation, and project that metric up. That's how we calculate your projected cache hit rate. One caveat there is that means that when we do it based on your traffic, it's really based, on the time you're looking at it retroactively to about a day to a week time period. So, it may not be, as they often say with the stock market, the past is not necessarily an indicator of future success. If the next day or the next week your traffic pattern rapidly changes, say something goes on sale, or you go into a holiday period, or you go into a weekend, it may turn out to be slightly different from the projection because it is really based on the historical data. But at least it gives you a better guideline than just groping in the dark for what your TTL should be. Okay, next question. For what period of time cache miss metrics are being calculated? Is there a way to see how this metric has changed after a new deployment? So the period of time the cache miss metrics are being calculated is, I'll have to double check, but I believe it's about a week where we come up with that estimate of the rate of how frequently each URL is looked at during the time period under investigation. And then, is there a way to see how this metric has changed after new deployment? At the bottom of the Cache Metrics tab, there is a screen that shows you your cache hit rate by deployed version. So you can see how your cache hit rate has changed over time that way. Another thing that we have in the Cache Metrics tab is the ability to look at just the last 24 hours on the current version. So those are your two options for looking at kind of the historical trend. We are considering additional enhancements that'll look at this either as a graph over time, overlaid with, for example, when cache clears happened, and additional filtering options to the Cache Metrics tab so that you can more fine tune, how you look at that data. If you have, suggestions, or I would really like to have this way to filter it, that's really useful feedback for us. And submit a ticket to us, reach out to us. There's now actually intercom right in the bottom. You can open a chat right with us from the Moovweb console. Just send a request, let us know. We always want to hear from you on feedback. Let us know how we could make this metrics tab more useful to you. So if it's not doing what you needed to do or not giving you some piece of information, send it in through there and we'll definitely consider it. Let's see. Next question. Why was the XDN version added to the build view? So in your demo, Yvonne, you showed that we've added this. What's the importance there?
So yes, I did show that. So let me just go quickly here into the deployments. So yes, we added this. XDN platform makes certain guarantees, strong guarantees that what you deploy is what will be running. The stack on which you have developed, tested, QA'd everything, and then deployed that stack, that particular configuration of your project code and our code will be running as is. We make that guarantee. We'll be running as is, until you deploy with some other version. And in a way, what we wanted to do when we were designing the platform is that rather than being a new source of change management for you, the platform is able to integrate into your software development life cycle as it is right now. And then you get to decide when you want to switch to any new version of the features and fixes that we offer. So the easiest way to sort of look at this as, we have heard feedback that's simply saying, all right, people would be able to see the deployments and see the versions of their own project and see the environment, but not see the exact XDN version on which something was working at the moment or something was being deployed at the moment. So that was our motivation there, and it sort of exposes this what we feel is a very important feature of the platform, is that the stability of the stack that you deploy at the moment where you have finished your testing and
Yvonne, could you just bring up developer.moovweb.com just to illustrate this for a second, and then we'll wrap up correctly at time. So at the upper right, you just click on that drop down 1.5. So the API is very stable and it's locked to a version. So basically this lets you know, anything that's in that documentation at 1.4.2 that you've deployed with, you can now be sure it'll stay stable. So that's another way of looking at why we put that there, so that you can make sure you're correlated to the right version of the API.
Right version. But yes, but it's not only the API, but also the underpinnings of the infrastructure. So for example, the format of the access logs, or whatever it is that we collect in a certain manner, all those things are specifically tailored to the version that you have used in building the product, right? And then we won't suddenly, our platform will not be the cause for you to sort of have to redeploy or something like that. You get the stability of the site, directly from your own testing, rather than from our platform being there to disrupt your software development lifecycle.
Okay, we are at time, so thank you, Yvonne, and we'll see everybody in the next 2 weeks. Thank you.